Evening, everybody. Tonight we're going to take a look at solving word problems using systems of equations. I know a lot of you don't like to look at word problems, but hopefully we can take a look at a couple of examples and show you just how easy it is to set them up and then use your knowledge of solving systems of equations to solve these problems. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, well, when we're taking a look at solving word problems, one of the things is we're going to have a bunch of unknowns, and I think one of the big keys is we have to identify what all those unknowns are. So if we're asking to find, quarters, nickels, and pennies, well, we really want to write down all three of those unknowns. If we have four unknowns, we want to list that fourth unknown, and then we want to come up with a relationship, something that we can pull from the word problem that identifies some piece of information. So if we have three unknowns, we should have three relationships. If we have four unknowns, we should have four relationships. So let's take a look at a problem here which has a couple of unknowns and see how that works. So the length is 5 units more than the width, and the perimeter is 9 times the width. Find the length and width of the rectangle. So they want us to find the length, and they want us to find the width. So I said that if we have two unknowns, that we should at least have two equations. So let's see if we can find two equations. It says here the length is 5 units more than the width. So L is equal to 5 units more than the width, so W plus 5. It also says the perimeter, and we know that perimeter is what? 2L plus 2W. So we know what the perimeter is, so we might as well say it. We know the perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. The perimeter is equals 9 times the width. Do I have two relationships now? Well, I have two unknowns and I have two equations. And as we look at this, hopefully you can see that we know what L is. L is W plus 5. And so I think the technique that I hope you're looking at now is we're going to use substitution. I know that L is the same as W plus 5 plus 2W equals 9W. And from there you can solve and get W. Once you've got W, we can put W back in for here, add 5 to it, and that'll give us our length. Okay? So just to reiterate how we did this, we knew we had two unknowns. Therefore, we knew we needed to find two relationships. Once we had the relationship set up, then we're going to take a look at, okay, what are the equations given us? Well, here we have an L equals. And from what we've learned, if we ever have something that says one variable equals relationship with another variable, the best technique to use with that is substitution. All right, let's take a look at a different problem here. Okay, in this particular case, we're dealing with, when I see my camera is not showing you the whole picture, so hopefully I can walk you through this. Tom has a total of $2.85 in pennies and quarters. If the number of Tom's pennies is 5 more than 3 times the number of his quarters, how many pennies and quarters does he have? So how many unknowns do we have? Well, we have pennies and we have quarters. Well, it says here that Tom has a total of $2.85. All right, so he's got $2.85 in pennies and quarters. Well, if I had 10 pennies, what would I multiply that by? Let's take a look at that. If I had 10 pennies, what would I multiply it by to figure out how much money I had? I would multiply it by 0.01, right? Okay, and that would tell me how much money I had. So if I had 20 pennies, I would multiply that by 0.01. So if I have an unknown number of pennies, then I have 0.01 times P. Okay? And if I had 3/4, I would multiply 3 times 0.25 to find out how much money I had. And if I had 5/4, I would multiply 5 times 0.25. Well, I don't know how many quarters I have, but I do know that if I have that number of quarters, I can multiply it by 0.25. So I have 0.01 times the number of pennies plus 0.25Q times equals $2.85. Now, I'm not a real big fan of decimals if I can get away with it. So the first thing I'm going to do here to clean this up is I'm going to multiply everything by 100. If I multiply this by 100, I end up with P. If I multiply this by 100, I end up with 25. And if I multiply this by 100, I end up with 285. And so my first equation that I have is P plus 25Q equals 285. Okay, well, we already said that if I have two unknowns, I need two relationships. Well, let's see if there's another relationship in here. If the number of Tom's pennies is 5 more than 3 times the number of his quarters, if the number of Tom's pennies, so his pennies, is equal to 5 more, so I need to add 5 more than 3 times the number of quarters. 3 times the number of quarters. So if I have 3 times the number of quarters plus 5, that will tell me how many pennies. And once again, I now have a P equals, I have a variable equals a relationship. So hopefully now you can notice that we're going to use substitution. I'm going to come up here and substitute in for P 3Q plus 5. 3Q plus 5 plus 25Q equals 285. Okay, from there I can just continue to solve. 28Q plus 5 equals 285. 28Q equals 280, and Q equals 10. I can then go back to one of the equations, substitute it in, 3 times 10 plus 5, so I know that I have 35 pennies and I have 10 quarters. Okay, and obviously we could then do the math, right? 10 times 25 plus 35 times a penny, and hopefully that gets us to $2.85. All right, so just a recap of what we've done here. Please take a look at what your unknowns are. What are you trying to look for? And then write down what relationships are given to you. In this relationship, we knew that there was a total of $2.85, sorry, and it was made up of pennies and quarters. If you forget how to figure out, take a look at what does it take to add up your quarters. Well, you're multiplying by 25. You can also see again how I got rid of the pennies and changed them into whole numbers. Makes just your life so much easier. All right, we'll have plenty of time tomorrow to practice. There is no post-video quiz, but I do want you to be prepared to discuss these 2 word problems in class tomorrow, and we'll have plenty of practice, like I said, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Good night.